while we're getting started, my name is Marano, and I work at JPMorgan Chase. I do like to think that we're a business with a conscience, so maybe it was meant to be that I jumped my spot and came right after you. And I think that when I say that, I imagine that some of you are like, really? You work for a big bank? I do like to say that, if you read about it, we are. I do work for, I think it's America's least hated CEO or global CEO. But Jamie is actually is probably the reason that I am here today. So as you're finding, do I click for my presentation? Okay, I'll give you a second. 8 years ago, well, prior to that, so I started my career in social good, and it was really about working in nonprofits and feeling like, okay, well, there's so much we can do to give back, and how much do nonprofits need to actually use their technology? Has anybody heard the phrase, how many here work at a nonprofit or a social good organization? Okay, hands down for a second. How many of you actually have dedicated technology staff? Okay. How many of you know what is called an accidental techie? Yeah. Are you an accidental techie?
Yes, I became one, yeah.
Yeah, so did you get caught fixing something someday and people said you're amazing and I'm going to go to you every single day now, regardless of what your job is?
Well, I'm an older millennial, so at the beginning of social media and everything, before there were jobs that were in digital, I basically was the go-to person for all of
I have a mic now.
for all of those things. So and then I ended up becoming the interpreter between our web tech team and our communication staff, which is now really what digital marketing is.
Fantastic. So when I started my career, I was working at an organization called NPower, and I actually helped start it. And what we were doing was providing tech assistance to nonprofits. The challenge was that most nonprofits were very focused on, obviously, their constituent base and giving back and their missions, but they didn't think about technology as part of that equation. Technology was really more of a utility. It's what you had to have to keep the lights on. It was really more of that back-end thing and wasn't a strategic part about how they delivered. That's what we started trying to shift as we went through. So then, about fast forward 10 years, I was in the conversation with JPMorgan, who happened to be on our board, talking about this, and what we were finding that corporations were doing is they were saying, you know what, we're done. We're not going to give nonprofits money anymore, and this was right around 2008, 2009. We're going to give you people, and isn't this awesome? And most of us on the social good side said, absolutely not. I don't want your people. I want your money, and I'll do what I need to do with it to serve our people, and that's what's going to be most important. But it wasn't changing their dynamics. So we said, how can we help that? How can we foster it? And we created what, I look at you as a millennial, we created what at the time we called Match.com for social good and nonprofit needs and technology. We now like to say it's like Tinder, trying to upgrade it to the modern day. But it was basically, what does a nonprofit need with their technology, and what is a corporate willing to give or able to give, and not scaring either side of that equation. So it became this matching tool and putting the two together. And in presenting that to the former head of technology at JPMorgan, he said, I feel like we do a lot of that here without a lot of strategy. So very back of the envelope, I went home and I said, I can do this. And it was one of those pivot moments in your career. And I said, what do I have to lose? I was kind of hitting a ceiling in what I was able to fundraise. And I said, I really think they're committed to this. And imagine I got budget and I could actually make something happen and get them that recognition for all the good that they want to do, but really not telling their story well. So what has become is what we call technology for social good. And it's very much about leveraging the power of people and technology to give back to our community by inspiring change and really changing mindsets. That said, I work at a very traditional company. So where it's just like you go in there and they're just thinking like, well, this is how we've always done it. So how many people here know what the definition of insanity is? Exactly. That's what it felt like when I got there. And not that I would say the bank is insane, but they were comfortable and a little bit nervous about changing anything. And we said, and what it came down to is that I sit in technology. So JPMorgan has 250,000 people. I like to say it feels like a small country. That said, 50,000 of that 250,000 are just in technology. And what that means is that if you've been reading the press, people will say there's not enough tech staff out there, and there was a big question about that one. So we said, how can we do this differently? How can I get you to consider what might be different? So who here has ever attended a hackathon? Awesome. So if you think about how we might attract talent in, we started to say, what if we brought people in a unique environment where we can actually observe them in a non-traditional way? So over the course of 24 hours, we bring people in around a social issue. So I just spent the weekend actually in Delaware at our 50th hackathon that we call Code for Good. We're going to hear a lot of for good today, I know it. So we weren't that creative with our names, but it's completely the message. So I bring in individuals with the talent for coding. Most of them are at their entry level of their career, and I say, let me introduce you to 2 organizations. So as an example, this weekend, we introduced them to the Be Positive Foundation, which is the Andrew B. McCunnough Foundation, which is very much focused on childhood cancers, and I introduced them to Goodwill of Delaware. And we talked to them about challenges they were facing, not tech problems. We said, these are challenges these organizations are facing in delivering on their missions. How might you address this with technology? And over the course of the next 24 hours, I invite you to do just that. We break them up into the teams, and what we're doing while they're doing that is we're observing them, not secretively. We let them know, we're gonna watch you, we're gonna help you, we're gonna teach you about who JPMorgan is, you're gonna learn about us. They come in and they get all the technology access, our staff are roaming the floor. So we have about 150 students and about 350 JPMorgan staff roaming and supporting, and they're getting to know us. And it's the prototypes. And we say, a lot of companies are engaging in social good today, or they're engaging in hackathons, but what they're not focused on is like they're bringing in what is a technology at their current company. We at JPMorgan Technology, we really want them to see that social good is what we focus on. So it's something we think about with our technology. But at the end of 24 hours, you're not going to finish. So I'll get to that in a second. So if you think about that, it's almost a teaser. What does it mean if I said to you, great, thank you, go home after 24 hours? What we have committed to is nothing ends up on the digital shelf, which means we build out every one of the solutions that have gone through the 50 hackathons, which has been hundreds of solutions, and then we welcome many more into our next creatively named program called Force for Good. And what Force for Good is, over the course of 8 months, talent in the organization get put onto teams of about 8 to 10 individuals, and they actually build out solutions that started in Code for Good, or they just got seeded into Force for Good right there. So at any given point, we have about 150 projects in flight. This is not full-time dedication. It's really the way that our staff get developed. So we've pulled back on certain development opportunities because staff go into these projects and have end-to-end opportunity over the course of about 4 hours a week. So we do something on Fridays where we say about half your day on Friday is called a Force for Good Friday, and you're working on these projects and you're building out these solutions to completion, to delivery, in a way that is sustainable, in a way that can actually drive change in these organizations. The one here you see here is an example of the Royal National Lifeboat Institute based in the UK. This is one of my favorites for lots of different reasons. But what we did with this organization is they came to us and said, we often focus on individuals who take their livelihood to the water, but they're low to moderate income fishermen, and often technology on their boats when they go out, and run the risk of getting stuck in waters that they didn't expect because they weren't able to identify what the weather conditions were going to be that day, and now they're out there, and something can happen to them. If they run into trouble, they have no way of really regularly communicating with us in a low to like no connection environment. So we created beacon technology for this organization, and they actually just deployed it down in Tanzania in the last couple of months, and they are able to go out and support these local fishermen so they don't have to be scared about going out into different conditions and not being able to be supported should they run into trouble. It's just one of many different examples, but this is one that we were actually started in a Code for Good challenge. And what happens in Code for Good is not that the winning solution is the one we build out. What we like to say to the students is don't get upset, but this is going to be bragging rights for the event. You win a prize, that's great. But we're going to take a mashup of all the great ideas that start in the events, and we'll let the organization identify what are the best features for their solutions. And then we build them out, as I said, in Force for Good. Another way for us to be thinking about, though, is when we think about talent, is everybody's saying, oh, there's a shortage of talent, there's a shortage of talent. If you only look in the same places, then probably there is. And to say we're going to get our disproportionate share, or really any company for that matter, is just not realistic. So what we've had to say is that there's a shortage of talent, it's just a shortage of in the places that we're looking. How else can we identify talent? So we've partnered with different workforce development programs, boot camps, apprenticeships, community colleges, and all different places to say, we want to invite you in. we've said to them in one of our example programs, which we call Tech Connect, we said, perhaps you're like me, who when you were young and were ready to go to university and said, I don't actually know what I want to be when I grow up. We tell our kids when they go to university, you need to know. You've got to plan your future out. You need to know what you want to be to grow up. That's just not realistic for many. So we say, perhaps you start a university without a full, clear path of where you want to go, but later on in your career said, oh, now I really love technology. But if you go the traditional route and you look at that CV, it looks confusing. Maybe they didn't actually major in computer science. Maybe they've only done a few semesters or a few classes, or maybe they actually just were learning it after hours with a family member or a friend. This is where we bring people in from all different backgrounds and we say, we're actually going to embrace the diversity of thought that you're going to bring to this equation. It's not just about the fact that you're a woman or an individual who looks different. We actually want to bring you in because of how you think. And we've been able to welcome hundreds of individuals into the firm in doing so. And this is just one example of our programs. The last thing on is the side of diversity when you think about in technology. So a lot of conversation in diversity when you talk about it in tech space is very traditional. Is like, are you black? Are you a woman? Are you Hispanic? So it very much stops at what you see. And if you truly look at the staff at any major technology company, it's not just that. And what you end up taking out of the equation is a lot of our white and Asian male colleagues, which is a huge percentage. To say and to say that we don't have a lot of women, black or Hispanic, is definitely an obvious. And that's why we want to stop recruiting in that space. But to ignore the fact what other colleagues bring to the table, and this is just an example of a campaign that we are running. So if you covered all the things on the side, you see your kind of typical white male. And at the organization, you only know the last two things. He's a software engineer and he's a man. But do you know country and raised in another? Do you know how he was educated? Do you know if he's an only child? Do you know if he plays on a sports team? We like to raise our kids and we say, be diverse, try different things, read this book, go to this play, be on this team, play this instrument. But then when you get to corporate environments, we say, wait, are you a woman? Are you black? Are you Hispanic? It's just that that's not all there is. It's an important piece of the conversation. It's just not the only piece. So we're trying to lend a little bit more to that conversation by introducing this as well. So to have a little bit more balance and a little bit more focus on the I of the D&I, which is inclusion. So I'll leave you with this last quote. So we really thought about this and we said, you know, this is a famous quote, actually not attributed, but it's just thinking about, we're not going to wait for this to all get better. We're going to adapt as we move through. And I invite you to do the same. Thanks.